We've got the probably final balance patch coming up right now in like a couple of weeks for Sunbreak. Keeping in mind that whatever changes come with it will be pretty much what Rise and Sunbreak are permanently, because like the game will be done. What should change? These are my thoughts, of course, and I understand that there will be plenty of people closer to individual weapons with both more detailed thoughts and different thoughts. Future me here. I don't know how to edit, nor do I do audio perfectly, my voice is dumb, and I don't know how to read scripts. Just bear with me, and apologies. Just a little bit of a preamble to clear things up. In my mind, the best balance situation for a game no longer receiving patches is one of stability, where the difference between moves within a weapon and weapons among weapons is relatively stable. I also believe that adjustments are very valid for PvE games, positive or negative. Outliers are outliers, and reducing the number of outliers results in a more balanced game, which is better for players in the long run. It may come at some temporary sacrifice. Combined with the fact that adjustments can overshoot or undershoot, it's best to be cautious about doing both at the same time. This is why I'm not going to be saying, like, this thing needs to be stronger too often. Jumping right into Greatsword, we got the impression that Surge Slash is being buffed, and I'd prefer a bit more raw, because it feels fantastic with element already. I wouldn't be opposed to doubling down on the element, but like, I'd take a little raw. Rage Slash is great, but maybe could use a little extra damage reduction, just a smidge, because we're getting to the harder stuff. Strong Arm Stance is our first major outlier. I'd double or triple the cooldown. It would probably do the trick. The ability just skips too much of Greatsword. Alternatively, and I'm not a fan of this, they could just stop small barrel bombs from affecting it. That would basically solve it as like a DPS move and would leave it to be a proper counter you have to find timing for. But I don't like that because it sets an exception when everything else is affected by bombs. The most significant change I would say would have to be the backstep, the alternate switch skill for Power Sheath. It doesn't really exist. It's basically less mobile, harder to use, so for all of this it needs to be more potent. I would just yoink the Power Sheath buff over to backstep, but I'd make the duration only around 10 seconds long with triple the effect. 30% raw for 10 seconds versus 10% for 30 seconds. One sheathes, one doesn't. I think it'd be a good balance. Onto Longsword. I legitimately do not know what changes Longsword should get. I'm not a 5th gen Longsword player, I just don't know. I do know that it's bread and butter, the old bread and butter specifically. The overhead swing, the second overhead swing, the poke, the little upswing, the fade slash, even the spirit combo all feel really bad. They probably should be improved just to open up other playstyles and synergize more effectively. The most common complaint I've heard from Longsword players is that Harvest Moon is over-centralizing while also being not friendly to the user. The combination makes it an irritant. I defer to those with experience here. If it needs adjustment, do it. Moving on to Sword and Shield. Metsushou Yogeki is the next outlier, and it needs some adjustment. It really only has too much KO, but that begs the question of does it have too much KO or do other weapons have too little? Peeps want Destroyer Oil to be stronger, and commonly the duration is singled out as too low. No complaints there, make it 45 seconds and I think people will be happy. I think Sword and Shield is pretty comfortable otherwise. That one little outlier is not much of one. It's hard to say whether or not it's weak relative to other weapons, because a lot of the weapons that are strong for bad reasons that should be changed. If it gets buffs and improvements, neat. If it doesn't, it's probably fine. In regards to dual blades, I haven't played them since Rise. From what I've heard and seen, it could use a near global buff, except for the drill. Sounds good to me. If other detailed aspects need changes, I defer to those more familiar. I like a lot of the ideas behind the changes in Sunbreak for dual blades, but I just don't work with them. Sorry. Hammer is my most recent addition to the main weaponry I use in Sunbreak, and I love it to death now. The most important thing about Hammer at the moment is how weak the basic attacks are. The The draw attack is worthless. It literally wastes time. Pounding twice into a golf swing is tragically weak. Ironically, pulling off the traditional hammer combo is much harder than doing anything else at the moment, especially charge attacks. It should be substantially stronger than it is. Doesn't make a lot of logical sense to me, especially when the charge attack is better. Speaking of charge attacks, Strength style could use a little bit more KO at the very least, if not also raw. I was playing with it recently, and it's not that far behind Element, but it could use a little boost. Like Sword and Shield, it's one of these scenarios where I'm like, is Hammer weak, or are the outliers just outliers? I don't really know, so we'll have to see. On to my former main, and, well, not former main, actually still main. Complicated. A horn. Doot doot. Make it dooter. Feels a little weak at the moment. Mostly, pretty much every area, actually. I wouldn't mind, like, a faster animation for Beat of Resonance, maybe the egg. But overall, yeah, it doesn't have that punch. I'd also like to single out my favorite addition from Sunbreak, the alternative to Multi-Crush, whose name I genuinely cannot ever recall. Could I look it up? Yeah. Will I? Nah. Regardless, I'd make that move more effective than I would other areas of the horn. It's a sick move, it takes a lot of time. It's basically the old recital animation. I like it a lot, it's so fun to use. It chains into the backswing, amazing. But either way, it just doesn't feel very worthwhile. I think Horn's a little weak, I definitely do. If Hammer was like not weak, I'd say Horn's definitely a little weak. Lance is like sublime. It's near perfect, it's so good, it's so fun, it's so safe. It just done a really good job on it. It has like one area I'd touch. Basically, elemental meta, so advancing thrust is just really crazy. You can basically do as much damage as a triple poke combo with just an advancing thrust. So I'd counterweight the normal pokes with a little bit more raw. And the swipe especially, and the counter poke. Weird area that nobody really uses, but I definitely would touch the counter poke most. I think Lance is also really strong, like genuinely busted. But compared to other outliers, it's not. So again, is it really weak? So yeah, I don't think it needs like that many buffs. I just think it needs to have some within the moveset adjustments. There's a move in there I'm absolutely forgetting for the record that needs buffing. I don't know what it is. If it exists, sorry. Maybe the charge attack actually, where you just run. I don't actually ever use that. So, Gunlance is interesting. I have a whole video on this, but for now I'm just gonna like touch over what I would do. It definitely needs some decent motion value ups, like 10-20% across the board, pretty much. It's a really slow weapon, and the motion values are dump. Most importantly, Gunlance just doesn't use element. It benefits so little from it. The triple poke sucks at the element. The upswing sucks. Oh my god, the upswing. It's really hard to balance the slams and slaps with really bad alternatives. If element was actually decent, then maybe you'd use pokes with an elemental build. You could probably give it 50% more elemental multipliers and it still would suck. I don't know, I'd have to see it, but I'm pretty confident it could take a lot of buffs. Now on to shells. They absolutely do need improvements because they just do slowly fall behind. I'd focus exclusively on level 7 and level 8 shelling. Half of what the motion values get, slap that on level 7, and the same as they get, slap that on level 8. It'll make getting to level 8 more important, but it already is, so I just do that. Now, to single out a couple things, wide supercharged shells needs like genuinely a 50% increase, not from the other things that once they're buffed, but like from now. It's mathematically useless. It is more efficient to charge attack twice. In an ideal world, Wormstake would only use the fast animation. The switch skill alternative has shown that speed and fluidity is far more important, and even if you do that, it should be stronger than the switch skill alternative by at least 25%. The alternative also is amazing, so I wouldn't touch it, but Wormstake needs to, like, it has a long way to go. These are what I would apply to a balance patch that we are getting, and not what I would do to Gunlance to make it a better weapon. Charge Blade is interesting. Impact vials, they definitely need improvement. They can't benefit from BUP, which is build-up boost. They fall way behind element. Even if they weren't buffed, actually, they would have still fallen behind. They probably could get like a genuine 30 to 50% buff. It might actually still not be enough. I don't know. Our next outlier, Counterpeak Performance, is actually the prequel to Strong Arm Stance. It needs adjustment too. It again skips too much of the weapon. I would definitely compensate for any adjustments, but like I'd personally make it 2 wire bugs or give you 3 files instead of 5. Again, compensation, the weapon isn't like top of the line, so I'd make it stronger in every other area because you would be using less Counterpeak Performance, which means less files. AED is falling behind compared to SAEDs, and I would compensate for that by making it faster. Alright, we arrive at Switch Axe. Honestly, I didn't even know I had this much to say about Switch Axe until I was editing and didn't like the segment I had recorded earlier. Switch Axe is one of the most fluid weapons in Rise and Sunbreak. Transforming is greatly encouraged with an array of improvements that streamline the weapon, but those improvements have come at a lot of costs. Elemental Burst Counter is just another addition that has questionable design. It's a novel counter at least, requiring timing and providing super armor instead of invulnerability, but it has an extremely low cooldown, does tons of damage, and skips the entire awakening sequence of the weapon. You know Sword Mode has an awakening option designed to be weaker and slower, but boost the awakening amount you receive? Why would you use that now? Adding to this problem, Switch Charger from Rise makes the normally risky reload you face when overusing Sword Mode completely safe and then some. Axe Mode is supposed to be the more mobile option that you have to use until you can find time to reload, but that serves no purpose when you can just make it safe. Even more confusing, the vertical finisher for the Wild Swings combo is meant to boost the speed of awakening, which no longer matters, because Elemental Burst Counter skips it. Weird thing too, I'm pretty sure the part breaker bonus from the vertical finisher only applies when you're unawakened, and it speeds up awakening. Then we have 2 more issues. Rapid Morph was used to make transformations more integrated and fluid, and absolutely achieved that. However, the damage boost it confers overshot the rest of the moveset, resulting in a mostly spam situation where you alternate between elemental burst countering and then morphing constantly. But that's not all. Normally, being in sword mode drains as you use it, and morphing restores a little meter to encourage swapping. However, using a level 3 rampage decoration, it rewards more than you can consume, enabling permanent uptime, which again begs the question of why axe mode even exists. So, what would I do? Elemental Burst Counter could get the same change as a strong arm stance, that is, double or triple the cooldown. I wouldn't touch Rapid Morph, I would just buff every other attack. It's hard to strike a balance where morphing is encouraged, but not a de facto solution to all problems. I don't think we can really salvage axe mode, but we're gonna try. For starters, the buff conferred when you use the vertical finisher for Wild Swings, I just make that last throughout the entire awakening stage until the awakening expires. For the actual axe attacks, I'm unsure. They definitely need a general motion value and elemental buff, but I really do not know. It might be better to specialize them more as a niche, kind of like the part breaker bonus tries to. But I'm not really sure how to do that without just, reworking the weapon. Insect Glaive is the last weapon we'll be talking at length about. But simply, it's got dumpy elemental values and slightly dumpy motion values. I basically would just make it more functional. That's pretty much it. I don't think it needs a lot of changes, the moveset feels fine, and mostly well balanced. Props to them for doing such a good job at integrating aerial movement and aerial combos into a normally grounded weapon. It's pretty great. The only other issue is Kinsects. They have really poor scaling stats, and some really odd design choices like being unaffected by skills entirely. I get it, they're alive and such, but did you know that cutting type Kinsects use your weapon's elemental value? But did you know, again, that they're unaffected by skills? Ingenious, ain't it? You make an elemental set, and your Kinsect is like, hey, I don't even know what element up means. So they use your base weapon's value. Why? You'd think that an assist Kinsect would be giving you, 50% maybe, or 20% more elemental value. In truth, it'll be giving you a fraction of that, because it just doesn't do anything. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and it really disincentivizes actually using your Kinsects. We end on the 3 ranged weapons. Joke's on you. This segment is short, I don't use these at all. All I can tell you is they're too strong, I don't know why, I defer to those who know why, and I defer to those who can tell you what should happen. To be clear, I do know why the ranged weapons are too powerful, but since I do not use them, I do not really think it right for me to engage in talking about how they should make ranged weapons balanced. All I can say is the old gunning had at least some counterbalancing to prevent it from being excessive, even though they were excessive. All I know is, I prefer the old gunning. I like how you had to time your shots, just like a melee player, and I liked how you had ammo limitations that prevented you from overusing one ammo, but that's then, this is now. We'll see how things go in the future. Okay. Phew, we've gone through everything. Yeah, I called for a lot of downward adjustments. A lot of people would call them nerfs, and I get it. Nerfs are usually just a negative connotation that, like, exceeds the balance perspective, so I didn't want to say it. If you say something's getting nerfed, people get the implication that whatever they'd like is being taken away, and that's not the goal at all. The goal is to make a more stable game. Sometimes you've got to become weaker to make a stronger game. Here's some bonus macro changes that I would actually like, and like additions essentially that I think could really help the game. I genuinely think we could actually use Elementless. I know, it's like, wait, Elementless, the curse that was brought in World? Status is basically raw now, and element outpaces raw in like almost every weapon's case. And we have a ton of weapons that like have no status or element that nobody can use. Only Hunting Horn currently, as far as I know, uses a weapon that has no status or element, but that's only because of really dumb reasons, and I won't get... The next thing is I need to see how Attack 4 and Crit Eye 4 change set building. I'm still not the biggest fan. I'm going to be a fan of making my level 4 slots that are currently holding a level 2 decoration into level 4 slots that are efficient. That'll be satisfying. But if I had my way, I would have kept those basic offense additions to conditional skills on level 4, being like, hey, suddenly... Oh no, that doesn't make any sense. I jumbled up those words, wow. If I had my way, I'd have kept most level 4 offense skills to be conditional ones, rather than just being like, yo, we're twice as powerful with level 4 slots than we used to be. I need to see how their additions pan out, in truth. I'm window judging, and like, it's just that, window judging. For all I know, I'll be like, oh, this is the greatest endgame meta we've ever had in our lives. I don't know. Next, I'd like a couple expanded anomaly restrictions. You know, like a 15-minute hunt option would be pretty great to encounter. 2-player restrictions are awesome. There's no join request search option for 4 players and 2 players. So like nobody ever searches for 2 because they're far less common. There just should be that setting, so you can just find either 2 or 4s. Duh. I'd like, you know, double afflicted, but I don't think that's happening. I'd also like 4 to 5 monsters. That could be quite interesting. A longer marathon of sorts. Lastly, in a dream world, hazard style changes would come to every monster as you go up in anomaly rank, kind of like Monster Hunter 4 Ultimates and 4's Guild Quest system. I don't think it's feasible. If I had to realistically choose 3 hazards like we are getting for Title Update 4, or have gotten, Geismagorm, Chaotic Gormagala, and Scorn Magnavalo would be 3 pretty great hazards to come. I'm also assuming that every Risen we get will have their own sort of hazard, like the current Risens do. That's basically like what I would want. I'm kind of not sure who else even could really be given an option. Geismagorm is just like, he needs one. Please, I want to fight them again. Well, that should be roughly the end of the video. I don't really have a whole lot more to say. Narrator, he did not have more to say.